T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus 60. 55 seconds and counting. Neil Armstrong just reported back. It's been a real smooth countdown. We passed the 50-second mark. Power transfer is complete. We're on internal power with the launch vehicle at this time. 40 seconds away from the Apollo 11 liftoff. All the second stage tanks now pressurized. 35 seconds and counting. We are still go with Apollo 11. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. We have a liftoff, 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Power clear.
All right, well, welcome to the Bullpen. I am James Roy. With me is Tom Chavarria, and we're here to talk Texans. But before we talk Texans, let's get started with how are you doing, Tom?
I'm pretty good. Weather is pretty good in Houston at the moment. Some people say it's not warm enough. Some people say it's too hot. I'm a big believer in the warmer the better. So it's about 85 today in Texas. So or in Houston, I should say. So weather's good. Ready for football. Just
how's the weather over at Minute Maid Park?
It's a little warmer there than it is anywhere else. Your local Houston Astros are not living up to the expectations that the fan base has for it. And unfortunately, a lot of them are new fans. A lot of them weren't there before 2017. So you just gotta ride with it. I mean, this team's really good. They're gonna be just fine. But there are people that are like, I don't know what to do. I'm not used to losing. So you got to deal with those guys.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think it's a lot like 05. I'd say it's just like a really rough start. And since I can remember, because like the first full season of Astros baseball that I watched, I remember like every day it's like, oh, the Astros are on, let's go sit down and watch it. It was like 05, and it was rough to start. It was not the most fun experience, but it got better as time went on. I mean, I still have faith that the team can turn it around. I don't think there's reason to be concerned a little bit, but oh well.
20 ball games in 21 days, and they played some of the best teams in all of baseball. I'm not worried.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't know if y'all can tell, but this is not a real CJ Stroud jersey. It's just I think I made a video on it. I got it on Wish. It doesn't even have the NFL logo on it, but I've never worn it, so I figured why not wear it now. It's looking rough. My goodness. Thank God that it was free. I didn't pay for it, so I'm fine with it. Maybe one day I'll get CJ to sign it or something. Who knows? But
you think he would? I don't know if he would. He'd be like, "Yo, what is this?"
Up here, I've got an Andre Johnson jersey. So most jerseys that people get signed and framed are not official jerseys because that would be really expensive to do that. So yeah, I mean, I imagine that I don't think he'd have a problem with it, but I don't know. CJ, if you're listening, you can chime in at any time. But let's go ahead and get into some football discussion. Dang, dude, we got Jets fans in the comments on YouTube. That's wild. Nothing compared to last week. Last week we had someone saying the Texans sucked in less kind words. But hey, we're glad that we're on your mind. So that's all I'll say about that.
Appreciate you,
the draft. Yeah, the draft is coming up, and I think I want to start with the draft discussion. Really, the big things that are going on in Texansdom is, the draft and jerseys. Honestly, this is the first off season where I feel like I've almost been more focused on something other than the draft, with draft week coming up. With the jerseys, I'm really hyped to see how those shape up. We'll talk about that later. The draft. I mean, what more can we talk about with the draft coming up. I mean, we've already talked about Stephon Diggs and how that moves in and affects the Texans draft strategy. We've talked about who, what, when, where, and why. I just want to know, has your opinion shifted at all on who the Texans should take with pick 42, assuming they don't trade up or down from there?
My opinion has been the same since day one, and it's not going to change until something different happens that something changes drastically within the dynamic of the team as it stands right now, as currently constructed. They have no reason not to take the best available player, whatever position that is. They have holes, if you want to call them holes, in rotationary pieces, but there's no starting position that I feel like they need to go fill with a draft pick right now. Somebody may earn a starting spot, but I don't feel that they have to go address that in the draft. So best available player, whatever that is.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I made a video on the Texans' top 5 draft needs recently, and that's how I prefaced it. It's like they could literally afford to, in any of their top 5 draft needs, not address it in the draft, and the team would still have a serviceable group at that position. That includes defensive tackle. It includes linebacker. I think that one thing to take into consideration when the Texans go into this draft is that what got them where they were last season was depth, stepping up when injuries hit. The Texans were one of the most injured teams in the entire league, and they managed by, especially on the offensive line, getting serviceable play from depth players that probably weren't expected to contribute much to teams, in the year 2023, right? So I think that when I look at depth and when I look at it through that lens, I have to believe that linebacker and defensive tackle are two positions that will be addressed. But I mean, I do think that if the draft comes through and the Texans get to pick 42 and they're like, oh, really like Ennis Rakestraw, he's great, cornerback, best player that is available at 42. Okay, we'll take him. Cool. And then they get to 59 and they go through each of the picks, and every time a player is the best player available, I wouldn't say they should take 7 corners or whatever, right? That's not what I'm saying, but the best player available in their eyes at each pick, I think, should be the pick, 100%. So I couldn't agree with you more. We do have a question from the chat. Someone is asking who you think the best free agent signing was from this offseason so far.
It all depends on what you value most for this team. If you felt like it was an offensive piece away, then it's Stephon Diggs. If you felt like the defense needed to get better, then it's Danielle Hunter.
Well, Diggs was a trade.
Well, yeah, but I kind of feel like, okay,
just offseason acquisition.
Yeah. I was looking at the acquisition standpoint. Man, words are hard. As far as like a free agent signing, it's got to be Danielle Hunter, because that was, I think, a guy that we talked about. I don't know how confident I was early in the offseason that they would go out and get him, and to be able to put him on the other side of Will Anderson. Because in the beginning of free agency, the talk was that, hey, we need to bring back our guy, figure out a way to do that. And then he got signed so quick in the process. It was like, well, crap. Now we've got this hole that we can draft or we can, trade for or whatever. And there were trade rumors that were rolling around. And to get Danielle Hunter is huge.
I like that, and I like that you brought up Stephon Diggs to start, because even though it wasn't a free agent signing, it's still very important. I think that the offseason as a whole really set the Texans up to have what I don't want to say is a worry-free draft, but like we've been pushing, you especially, I have assessed what you've said, and I agree with it, that best player available is the move in the draft, and I think every move that they made this offseason set that up. For example, if they don't get Danielle Hunter, they might reach on a defensive end early in the draft, right? There's a lot of moves that were made throughout the offseason, and I agree that Danielle Hunter was one of the more important ones. I want to go offense. I want to look at that and say that that's one of them. I mean, Joe Mixon is another one that was technically a trade, but would have been a signing, and that, I think, in a weak running back class, to me, is my favorite move. Because I think that the moves around it, what makes it better is the acquisition of Stephon Diggs. I like bringing in Mixon to a team that is very similar to what he has thrived in previously. People talk about, well, Joe Mixon thrives because he had three great wide receivers in Chase, Higgins, and Boyd, and that really lightened the box so that he could thrive in that system. And then people will go, well, he's not going to thrive with the Texans. And I look at the Texans receiving core, and I go, so you mean to tell me the receiving core comparable at worst, it's comparable. And
I
then
think it's
you
better when you include the tight end.
I think it's better. Yeah, but I didn't want to come across as a homer and just say outright that it was better, but you read my mind there. But not only that, but the offensive line play stands to reason that if the offensive line is healthy, that he will get better offensive line play. And so I mean it's a win, that signing, or I should say it's a trade. I'm going to treat it as a signing since that's the Texans traded to make, get exclusive rights to sign, right? I like that one a lot, and I also like it from the perspective. One of the more divisive topics with the Texans throughout this past season has been Dameon Pierce, and can he get right? Is he going to get left behind at some point? And I think that Joe Mixon is someone who could definitely benefit Dameon Pierce being in that same running back room. So while I do think the Texans should address running back in the draft, I think there's definitely room to pick one, maybe in like the 4th round or later. I do really like the Joe Mixon signing. Who is this guy in the comments on Instagram saying Cowboys to the Super Bowl? Good grief, man! We got everyone and their mother, every other fan base wants.
They are brainwashed to say that. Like even if he wants to talk Texans, he's Cowboys to the Super Bowl.
Well, while we're on the topic of other teams, there is a question in the chat that is interesting. So C.J. Stroud recently was asked by Chancellor Johnson in his presser what he thought of Marvin Harrison Jr. Personally, I don't want to come across as rude, but I was like, that's a dumb question. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best wide receiver prospect in the draft. And we got as much of an answer from C.J. Stroud. Don't overthink it. Look at the film. Film don't lie. But this question is the Chicago Bears, if they had kept Justin Fields, do you think they could have drafted Marvin Harrison Jr.? And I mean, the answer is yes. I mean, I hate to say it. It's a pretty obvious answer. Would they? Should they have? I mean, I'll go first. I've been very outspoken that Justin Fields is just not a good quarterback. So would it have been the smart move in my mind? No, 100% not. I mean, you give Justin Fields Marvin Harrison Jr., that's like, giving a 16-year-old who just got their driver's license a Lamborghini. And don't be surprised when they spin the wheels out and wreck that thing, right? We're going to have people talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. as a draft bust if we hand him over to Justin Fields. So do I think he's going to be set up much better? I think that pairing Marvin Harrison Jr. with Kyler Murray is a better situation than with Justin Fields. I will say that. But Tom, I would like your thoughts on this.
I'm 180 degrees the other way. I don't understand the logic behind people that are out on Justin Fields. I had a different offensive coordinator every year, and it seemed like when he was allowed to, when the offense was tailored towards him to be a lot like Lamar Jackson, he looked like Lamar Jackson. And the knock in Baltimore is they never got him any weapons. And the minute they get him a weapon, Lamar Jackson is going to set the world on fire. And the opposite thing is being said about Justin Fields. Oh, you can't put a weapon there. He can't use them. He can't throw it to them. But no one's saying that.
What did he do with DJ Moore?
Is DJ Moore equal to Marvin Harrison?
Would you consider DJ Moore a weapon? I'm asking your opinion. I mean,
I've never been. DJ Moore's a deep threat. Do I think he's an elite route runner? Do I think he can separate? No. I think he's a guy you just throw a bomb to, and if the scheme fits and they run a busted coverage or something, then he gets open. I just have never been a big DJ Moore guy. I don't know that I'm ready to close the book on Justin Fields, considering before he got DJ Moore, who did he have? And it was never an argument. There was never an argument made that he had the right system, the right coordinator, or the right anything other than, well, he's just not a good quarterback. He didn't win football games. And then you look at what's around him and it's like, well, who's winning with that? I'm so interested to see what Caleb Williams says, because they're going to draft him. And if he goes in there and he stinks, what's going to be the story? Are you going to say that Caleb Williams is now a bad quarterback? Or are we finally going to address the room and go, maybe we were just really hard on Justin Fields, and the dude had garbage to work with.
Not gonna lie, I mean, I think public opinion has set up a narrative where Caleb Williams shows up and is the fall guy as well, because there's this public opinion shift on Caleb Williams, and he's just an off-platform guy, and what he does is impressive, but it all involves being off-platform and all this other stuff. And I'm like, there's a lot of conversation that I've been sucked into personally, at times where it's like he's a generational prospect, but like look at all these things, and maybe he's not that great. So I think that the narrative is easily being set up for Caleb Williams to go in there. If he does well, he does well, and people will give him his flowers. But if he doesn't, no one's going to look and go, Chicago just traded away Justin Fields and got Caleb Williams and still sucks. I wonder why. They're going to go, Caleb Williams, they hyped him up as this generational prospect, and now, look, he was to Chicago and he sucks. Blah, blah, blah. I think.
Mr. Williams in the chat's dead on. That offensive line had him running for his life.
I mean, that'll be good. Caleb Williams will probably thrive with that based off of how everyone's talking about him as a prospect. He just needs to get off platform and make a great throw.
Yeah, but when Justin Fields did it, you said he couldn't throw the ball and he was a bad quarterback, even though he'd run for 180 yards and score 2 touchdowns rushing.
I mean, when we look at, so I hate doing this, right? Because I'll be the first person to go, guys, the stats don't tell the whole story. But if we look at Justin Fields and we compare him to Davis Mills, we're going to get the same passing numbers, and the only thing that separates them is a runner. If Davis Mills could run like Justin Fields, would you have stuck with him over drafting CJ Stroud?
I don't know, because I can't tell you. Davis Mills never was that dude. There was never anything that you saw Davis Mills and go, oh, he's the quarterback. But with Justin Fields, I'm telling you, and I apologize to anybody that came looking for Texans content, because we're definitely off the rails. But
I tied it back into the Texans. We got Davis Mills in this conversation now.
But
I know that's not what anyone wants to hear.
No,
but...
right? What? Who? Forget that guy. Yeah. But for me, Justin Fields is one of those most intriguing conversations, because I don't see a ton different between him and Lamar Jackson. The difference is the rest of the team around Lamar Jackson is very, very good. And I think that's a reflection of Baltimore and the way they've structured their team. Their defense is solid. Their run game, they run with everyone. And they've got a generation, or probably what I think is a generational tight end. So you put that all together, they win football games. You go to Chicago, and they don't have any of that. And this quarterback has flashed the potential to be very similar in that style offense. And everybody's just, he's okay. We don't want him. So
it'll be interesting to see. I don't want to close the door on the Bears, because that would be hypocritical of me, since the Texans were literally viewed the same way for several seasons. Like, there's no redeeming them. They will just suck forever. And then the right move, which could be Caleb Williams for the Bears, and all of a sudden we're talking about them being a contender in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I can't sit here and act like I know the Bears roster well enough to say that they're like shaping up similarly, but I don't know. I'm glad that they decided to move on from Justin Fields, and that's where I'll leave it at. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Go ahead and
last thing I'm going to say,
skip back and screen record that or whatever. But
when Justin Fields takes Russell Wilson's job, like week 4 or whatever, because he's horrible, and lights it up for the Steelers, who have an amazing defense, and all of a sudden it's like, holy crap, where'd this Justin Fields come from? I definitely want to sit down with all those people and go, I tried to tell you. You put a team around the kid and maybe he can play a little bit. I mean, there's some weapons there to work with. They've got a good running back. They've got an amazing defense. I'd just be really surprised.
I mean, I think it's either Justin Fields is what everyone wants him to be, and Mike Tomlin still has a job, or, Russell Wilson's not good. They shift to Justin Fields. They find out that neither one of them is serviceable as a starter in the NFL. And then Mike Tomlin is looking for a coordinator gig elsewhere, or moves to advising for the Steelers. But speaking of the Texans and how this is a Texans podcast, we should probably talk about them. We got questions from the chat. I'm gonna let the chat guide this pod. I feel like that's a good idea. I'm gonna take a page from the Texans playbook with the new uniforms, and I'm gonna give the fans what they want. So, with that, what do you think the Texans should focus on in the draft other than offense? I think we've both been pretty vocal about this, but I'll let you go first. So what is the focus?
I've seen some comments about corner with like TJ Tampa and stuff in the chat. I think that the corner, while yes, there's a different. I think there's different like ways of
I gotta
looking
throw
at
that
it.
one up there. Sorry,
Right,
I
yeah,
need you guys to see what I'm laughing at.
yeah, I saw it too. Um, corner, they went out and got a couple guys, so I think corner's fine. DT for me, defensive tackle is going to be where it's at, 100%.
I think defense is the focus too. I mean, I've referenced it a couple of times. The top 5 draft needs. I put offensive line at 5 because I felt like it was the thing that could be addressed on the offensive side of the ball outside of running back, which was my honorable mention. But my top 4 draft needs for the Texans are defense. I think they've done more than enough this offseason addressing the offense. If there is a hole in the offense, it's not something that can be fixed by throwing more players at it. So I mean, outside of, obviously adding another running back to the running back room that can be RB3, but that's not like a super pressing need in my opinion, based off the Texans' usage of RB3. So I would say linebacker to me based off depth. So I've memorized the depth chart because that's how invested I am in understanding the state of the linebacker position for the Texans. For those of you that are looking at the top of it and going, wow, the Texans are set. Aziz Al-Shair, Christian Harris, Henry To'oTo'o, those are your top 3. So one, as John Crumpler said last week, Henry To'oTo'o was kind of a liability in coverage. So we're assuming in base defense, we're running 3 linebackers. To'oTo'o is a starter now, okay? So let that sink in. And then look at the league where we usually see 2 linebackers on the field because that's modern defense. That's just how it goes with the nickel being more common. And we look at the linebacker depth chart. To'oTo'o is your first guy in. You know who the other 3 linebackers are on the depth chart right now? They are Jake Hansen, Neville Hewitt, special team superstar Neville Hewitt, and Delshawn Phillips. If we get to now, I said this before, and I'll say it here. I said it about Blake Cashman last offseason. I was like, Blake Cashman, we gave up a 6th-round pick to get him from the Jets. Like, what is this guy even going to bring to the table? And he turned out to be the best coverage linebacker on the team, and really, I think, proved a lot of people wrong. But with that being said, the signing this season, the player that was brought in from outside, because Jake Hansen and Neville Hewitt, by some miracle, have been on the Texans roster for a few seasons now. But Delshawn Phillips is that guy that they signed. So if they think that he's the next Blake Cashman, then by all means. But I don't have any reason to believe that that's what they're thinking. So to me, the most pressing need is linebacker. I think that the combination of talent in the defensive tackle room, while lacking in a clear starter, fills all the roles the Texans need, from first, second down guy, with Danico Autry playing passing downs. I'm gonna have to disagree with that one. Sorry, we got a comment in the chat. But I mean, I think that the Texans defense as it stands is good on the surface level. I think it's easily the best in the division, but I think that there's, with injuries and how they affected the Texans last year, I don't think there's depth that could make up for if there was an injury. So that's why I mean, and that's the lens that I look at the Texans draft needs through is depth, because that's really where they're at. Best player available, defensive depth. That's what it becomes. And so, I mean, that's where I'm at. There's another question. Would y'all be shocked if the Texans traded back into the end of the first round? Tom, where you at on that?
We had a little friendly wager, if you will, with John Crumpler last week on over or under 1.5 trades for the Texans this draft, and he took the over. I feel the same way. I think James feels the same way. He's going to make trades. That's what Nick Caserio does. I fully believe he's going to move up. He's going to move down. He might get more draft capital. Don't know. Just don't know. Just know he's going to make trades. To your linebacker point, I am the least concerned about linebacker for one major reason. And you kind of spoke to it. Like Blake Cashman, who was he before the Texans got him? Did you know much about Blake Cashman before the There's a lot of people in the league that did not know Blake Cashman
Now, I will say,
before.
Blake Cashman, I heard about his potential. There was people that were like, entering the league, he had potential. I've heard nothing similar about Delshon Phillips, which is the only outside acquisition that I have. I don't know.
And the reason I don't worry about linebacker, because A, they could go make a similar trade. B, they could bring in somebody undrafted. But the real reason, the main thing of it all, is that D'Amico Rhymes was a linebacker. So he's coaching these guys up. When you see some of the things he did with, Christian Harris and Blake Cashman, I have no doubt in my mind that if you get a guy from wherever, Cooper or Jalen Simpson, like Mr. Williams is talking about, I feel confident that if they go draft a linebacker, D'Amico Ryan's going to coach this guy up. So whether it's the
Like
third
Toa Toa.
round, yeah, exactly. So when I think about defensive, places, the areas of concern, linebacker for me isn't one, because if they took the last dude in the draft at linebacker, I would still think D'Amico could turn that guy into something.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that's my view on the defense as a whole, which is why, as I've said, I mean, if they don't draft at a position of need, I trust they'll probably bring in some undrafted player or just some free agent that's sitting there and make do. So I don't think the Texans can really mess up the draft so bad that unless they just fail to address any needs in terms of depth. So I agree with you on that. As far as the trading into the first round goes, I don't know if they have enough assets that they would like to trade. I think they really like the second round because of talent. So I don't think they're looking to trade their other second round pick, which I think would be the required package to jump back in. It would also be very interesting to trade out of the first round for a future second round pick to get Stephon Diggs, and then pair your other second round pick to jump back in. It would take a talent that the Texans just really like. But I do believe that there's not 9 roster spots. I feel like I have to explain myself on that because I've gotten some comments when I said that on Instagram at one point. But there's not 9 roster spots available for rookies. So I think that the late draft picks will be traded in order to facilitate moves upwards. Maybe they move down and grab some future draft picks to continue the trend of being able to trade. But I think a lot of the movement will happen second round or later. I could see the Texans not picking after the 5th round, if they so choose, or maybe piling up some draft picks to move their draft capital into the future and taking less picks this year. I don't really know, but trades are 100% inevitable. I'm a little lower on trading back into the first round. I think upper part of the second round could be a thing if they want to trade their 3rd round pick or their 4th round pick to do that. But I mean, we'll see. Looking at other questions, says, do you think the Texans could draft rookie Spencer Rattler to be CJ Stroud's backup if Davis Mills gets released? I don't think Davis Mills would get released. I think they'd just as soon rather trade him before they just dropped him. I think there's enough value there that other teams in the league would give up capital. And if he does get released, he would not clear waivers. There would be a team in the waiver wire that would pick him up. But I do like Spencer Rattler. I think that if you're replacing Davis Mills, that Spencer Rattler is a very sensible pickup. I like his potential. I don't know. What do you think, Tom?
I think he screams practice squad guy. Like a dude that they could draft and stash him there, and then hopefully, kind of have him in the quarterback room. I don't necessarily know that whoever that guy is needs to be anybody of note, because you hope that CJ plays all the time. Like, you never want to see that guy play. So if he's available late, I could see them trying to do the upside thing, having him as a backup. But ideally, it would probably just be journeyman to journeyman to journeyman. You know what I mean? Mills, as long as he wanted to go, just because he knows the system. But it's an interesting thing that I saw that they brought him in for like a visit or whatever. But where are you going to put him? Do you really need to carry 3 quarterbacks?
I mean, you have the emergency, so I mean, and someone, Mr. Williams here on the YouTube comments, is asking, why would we get rid of Davis before Case? I don't think you tie Davis Mills to Case Keenum in any way. Case Keenum serves an entirely different purpose from Davis Mills. I know that this past season, the Texans didn't have enough confidence in Davis Mills to start him when they needed to win in Tennessee. And so that raises a lot of questions. But looking at it from just like an analytical perspective and removing what happened last season from how you view the quarterback position, you have Davis Mills, a rookie or a guy who's on his rookie contract for one more season. And so the only value that he has is if another team thinks that he's a high level backup that could potentially step in. So with that, it's like a 5th or 6th round pick, I think, in my eyes, that you could get for him. You can't get a pick for Case Keenum. Case Keenum is been in the league a really long time and is a veteran presence in the quarterback room. I think he sticks around simply for the fact that of the positive effect that he's had on CJ Stroud in terms of like being a positive locker room presence. And I think it trends properly with how D'Amico and Nick have spoken about person over player to stick with Case Keenum in this quarterback room, at least until the end of this contract they have him on. I like Tom's idea of a journeyman quarterback in general for that role, but I think for the backup, you either have a journeyman, or in this case, if you think Spencer Rattler could potentially play a similar style of ball to CJ Stroud. I know he's highly recruited. I'm pretty sure he would fit the trend of number 1 overall recruits coming out of high school that the Texans have shown with Jeff Driscoll, Davis Mills, and other players that they've acquired that Nick likes to pick up. But I think that the reason I like Rattler is because I think that his upside is good. Like, worst case scenario for me is CJ Stroud not playing next season. But if we had a guy like Rattler and Rattler steps in and plays half decent, right? Because last year, my big argument for Davis Mills as QB2 was that if CJ Stroud went down, that Davis Mills would step in and bolster his trade value for an offseason trade. So likewise, I think the big thing with having a rookie who has a high upside is that on the off chance that you need him to play, if he's a similar quarterback to who you have out there, he can probably step into the scheme, show something, and then show good trade value if you decide to move on from him, or be a serviceable backup if that's what you want him to be. So that's about where I'm at. I mean, but this whole situation of people being anxious to move on from Davis Mills, I think stems from him being the center of a lot of the discourse. When you're a poverty franchise and you play awful football for 3 years straight, someone's got to take the brunt of it. And I think Lovie Smith and Davis Mills were kind of the scapegoats, the punching bags, if you will, for the fan base through that time. So, I mean, I don't think Davis Mills is an awful quarterback. I will 100% agree that he didn't play very well for the Texans on a team that was pretty devoid of talent and had been stripped of most of its future, ability to build a roster during the time that he played for them. So, I mean, I don't know. I think he'd be a serviceable backup. John Crumpler said it last week. What did John Gruden say? He said we don't practice screwed. We don't worry about who's playing backup. If CJ Stroud goes down injured for the Texans next season, I'm gonna stop talking about the Super Bowl in 2024, or the 2024 season, and I'm gonna look forward to the 2025 season and start talking about that Super Bowl. So all this talk, I obviously had a lot to say about it, but the backup quarterback situation to me is just, I don't know. It's fun off-season talk, but once the season starts, you won't hear me talking about the backup quarterback situation. I don't know. Tom, do you have anything to say to that before we move on to the next question?
No, I mean, I totally agree. I hope we never see whoever the backup is. It's you like to have a good, solid backup if you can. I think that's what Davis can be. It's just going to be up to him how long he wants to be that, or if he wants to try to see if he can find a way, to get a starting gig on one of these teams that just doesn't really have a QB. But I'm fine with whatever they want to do as long as it includes number 7 being the quarterback for the Texans until he doesn't want to play quarterback anymore.
Shoot, pick up Kurt Benkert from the Sleeper, from him, the Aaron Rodgers old backup. I don't care who you pick up to play backup for the Texans. Just have one there so that the Texans can continue to play even if CJ Stroud's down. And I'll watch, but I'm not going to be happy about it. So the next question up, I like this topic because it's honestly something that I've thought a couple of times. But we need to raise the topic of the Texans playing home games with the roof open. I don't know. I mean, I feel like from the early parts of the season, keep it closed. I'd like the air-conditioned environment. But once it reaches a point where it's like nice and chill outside, as chill as it can get in Houston, Yeah, right. Open the roof. I mean, I think I'm all for it. How do you feel about the roof of NRG Stadium, Tom?
I don't really care. I guess it's just cool to have. For me, I don't care if it's ever open. Um, Minute Maid, Minute Maid. A lot of Astros fans, they get so upset because they never open that. Come to find out,
And it's such a beautiful view.
I
Such a
understand.
beautiful view.
Come to find out, the players don't like it. The players want
Well,
it
yeah.
closed. So for me, if the players want it closed, close it. If you're telling me CJ goes, hey, I want air conditioned. I don't need to deal with any of the weather. I don't want to deal with the elements. I don't want a weird, you know, cloud to come in or the sun to hit my receiver in the face and then he can't catch the ball. I don't care.
No, I agree. I mean, I agree that a valid point was brought up in the chat, which is that with the science of sound, leaving the roof closed does create that loudest stadium I've ever played in, as C.J. Stroud once said, and Pat McAfee effect. So I think that, especially in the prime time and playoff games, I think that the roof needs to be closed. You need to create that sound environment that's tough to play in, but. I mean, I do like the idea. I think more so with Minute Maid Park than NRG. I like the idea of the roof open from a like the views perspective. But I've never been to a game at NRG where the roof was open. It's always closed. I'm convinced it doesn't actually move, and that they just told us it does. And that's my new Texans conspiracy theory. The roof, does it actually open? It probably does, but I mean, does it? Are birds real? Who knows? Um, Couple of comments. Good stuff, fellas. Look forward to tuning in more often. Thanks, Mark. This draft is like adding salt and pepper to an already delicious meal. I couldn't have said it better myself, Jay. That is about right. Texas Dev, no releasing Davis Mills. Yeah, the QB room's locked in. I agree. Texas Dev. That's 100% about where I'm at. I mean, I think that if they wanted to add a QB late to compete, sure, but I mean that's just where they're at. Who's the best player available? Best player available. BPA. That's where we're at. Trade up for Kool-Aid. We already discussed trading up, but Kool-Aid is definitely a player that I'd be down. I think that more so I'm down to trade up. I'm kind of hoping Ennis Rakestraw falls down to 42. But let's see. Am I the only one who thinks we need a different jersey design to our helmets instead of the jerseys? Let's talk about the jerseys. So by the time you hear from us again, the jerseys will be out. Oh, look, Patrick Mahomes is in the comments. That's probably actually him. No, I'm just kidding. Kool-Aid the drink. No, Kool-Aid McKinstry, the cornerback. The Texans uniforms will be out. There's 4 concepts. We've already seen one of them. There's a lot of talk about what could be. We know for a fact there's not a space-themed uniform, which could let you down if you thought that was a real possibility. But let's talk about the uniforms. The big thing that I want to talk about is that with new information that's been brought forward, I posted a whole video. What do you mean, Patrick? Patrick, I know you don't like being called Pat. You prefer Patrick. So welcome to the chat, Patrick. Here we go. I caught myself there. But I'm convinced that there's not going to be a white helmet. There's not going to be an H-Town blue helmet. The third helmet is going to be red with blue horns. I'm calling it right now. I think that horns is the concept. And
So
the thing.
So I'm confused. So 2 red helmets?
Yeah. So here it is, right? We've already got the battle red helmet with the logo, and we've got the blue helmet with the logo. Those are staying, right? Those are the same. But what the new helmet concept is it's applicable across. I like this concept. I told you the reason I liked Liberty White helmet was because it would be easier to assimilate to more uniforms. It'd be more versatile, right? I think so. The third concept, the spirit of the bull, is what gives me the impression that, and also watch the Texans released a 15-minute video with Doug Vosick and all the people involved in the new uniform that talked about how they're going to include that old font H at some point, probably like on the chest right here or something like that. And there's a lot of good info in there. But the one thing I got out of it is I've heard enough people just offhandedly say, I'd like to see horns on the helmet, that I know they at the very least they workshopped it. They came up with concepts, and if it was any bit good, and if they got good feedback on the horns on the helmet, it 100% happened. So I know there's people that have seen it. if you've seen it, feel free to send me a DM. I won't ruin your NDA. I'll keep it to myself, but I'd love to know before Tuesday any information really. But no, don't violate your NDA for me. I'll wait. But I think horns on the helmet. What do you think?
I agree. I totally agree. I just don't know that red. I think it's got to be another color, right? There's no way you're going to get too red, too blue. I feel like it's got to be a white, or maybe it is the H-Town blue. I don't know. But I just feel like it's got to be a third color.
I mean, I think red is the only one. So the only concept I've seen that I liked was red. Is one. All the concepts that I saw in white looked cheesy. I didn't see any concepts in blue, which leads me to believe that that's not the one they chose. It could be. I mean, it's either it's blue and red. I don't know. To me, I think it just works best like red. You got the horns right here in blue, and then with like a white outline or something, or maybe H-Town blue outline. I don't know. They'll find a way to incorporate anything. Look, Patrick Mahomes hopes we make the playoffs. Focus on your goals. You will always make it in life. Thank you. Totally real Patrick Mahomes. I hope you show up more so that can be an ongoing bit is our conversations with the current GOAT at quarterback. Not for long, but he is. Not going to deny it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's horns, 100%. How do you feel about the H? So, like, Doug Vossick all but admitted that they're going to include the H in some way on one of the uniforms. How do you feel about that? Because I've got mixed reviews from my probing of the public opinion on Instagram and Twitter.
I like the H. I like it a lot. I am terrified of seeing it on the uniform. I can't imagine any scenario where we have all the other things that we've talked about, and like you see the white uniform. Where would you put the H on that? Like I don't see how you would use it.
I mean,
where do you put it?
Right here. I think it's right here on the chest, the same place.
And so instead of Texans, instead of Houston, it's just
on So the one thing that we have to keep in mind, right, and it's very important, and I'm glad that it's more publicly known, is the 4 uniforms will be entirely different concepts, right? I think that the home and away uniform will probably look really close to each other because that's just what I would expect. But the spirit of the bull and the H-Town uniform, I think the H-Town uniform, H-Town and tough, is probably the most likely place where that H shows up. And so I think it can be here, and then it's not going to be on every uniform. Like we already saw that the white one had Houston on it, and I've already talked about how I'd like to see it kind of like baseball, where it's right here, Houston or Texans, depending on if you're home or away. I think that would be cool. But I'm just really interested to see. So I've been someone who's been very vocal about not liking the idea of putting H-Town blue on the uniforms because it feels like we're, hearkening to a day where the team was just as mediocre, if not more so. And it was tough to watch. And I mean, it was football in Houston. That's what it was. So
the Oilers went farther than the Texans ever went.
So it was still, they didn't win a championship outside of the NFL championship in
but
61, right?
You can't refer to them as mediocre and the Texans anything less or anything more than that.
All I'm saying is that my vocalness against H-Town Blue is that it feels like reminiscing on something that just didn't really accomplish the mission that still needs to be done, which is a Super Bowl. A Super Bowl has not been won in Houston, and we're looking back at a team that didn't do it, that now exists elsewhere. And I'm not going to say I agree that the Titans' whole use of that and their owning a color thing is kind of dumb. And so I like the use of H-Town Blue from that perspective to stick it to the Titans, right? Always anything that will stick it to the Titans. That's great. I'm all for it. But until about halfway through the uniform process, I was kind of against it. I've seen some concepts that lead me to believe that H-Town Blue can look really good, which should be no surprise to anyone who was probably looking at it outside of the Oilers' perspective, just liking the color. So that's the uniform I'm most excited to see. Just that and the spirit of the bull uniform. The home and away uniforms, I think, will be. I mean, we already saw the away uniform; it looks great. I think the home uniform will look very similar, so I'm not worried about that. But I'm just excited to see the H-Town Blue uniform because I think H-Town Blue can look better than it ever did on an Oilers uniform, on a Texans uniform if it's done right. I don't know. How do you feel about it?
We're gonna find out real quick from the man, the myth, the legend, J.J. Watt, who has been advocating for these colors, for that uniform forever. He wanted so bad to wear it. So the greatest Texan to ever do it has been saying, I love that uniform. I love that uniform. I wish I could have got to wear it. You know that they're gonna have to. I mean, they're gonna have to do something with that. That's gonna kind of like JJ's got to be like, man, I like this. I think if they didn't consult him in any way, I think it's a mistake.
I think so. I think he's seen them. I have to believe it. Like there's no place in my mind where I'm like, oh yeah, JJ, that's not a guy who's seen the Texans uniforms.
Speaking
So
of, did you see the Instagram
I was
comments?
gonna say it.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll let you lead into it here. You go ahead and tell the people what you're referring to.
So speaking of JJ is very public about his charity softball game that he does every year. It's the JJ Watt Foundation Classic or whatever. It'll be in Sugarland at Constellation Field, May 4th, I believe is when it is. And so out of nowhere, once great Houston Texan DeAndre Hopkins was like, man, I'm really looking forward to getting an invite to this one day. To which JJ responded and said, well, you got to retire to play for the Legends, or ... with the looking eyes, and left it at that. So
I'm still mad. I bought a DeAndre Hopkins jersey like the year before he left, a Liberty White DeAndre Hopkins jersey. It's still sitting in my closet collecting dust because he was traded away right away in that off season after I got it. So, and I got it for Christmas, so I only had it for like a couple weeks before he left the team. It was wild.
I had mine
But
the season before in blue.
yeah, so I mean, I'm not one to be like, oh, D Hop, I can't stand that guy. Don't bring him back. I personally I don't have any hard feelings for D Hop. I mean, I think that if he was complaining about money, it's because he was worth it. If he butted heads with Bill O'Brien, I mean, I could understand that. Who didn't, right? So there's no room for him in the receiving room right now, based off of how the Texans are stacked at that position. But I mean, if you want another wide receiver, sure, give CJ all of the targets. He'll throw for 5,000 yards and won't have a 1,000-yard receiver at that rate if we just keep throwing receivers at him. So, I mean, I'm all for it. And that brings up a question that I want to ask you that I've just thought of. Well, I've had it around, but I've been hesitating to ask it because I don't like the premise around it. But I'll go ahead and ask you it. So we get to the end of the 2024 season, and you look at Stephon Diggs' stat line, just his stat line. No context of how the Texans did or where those catches were made. Just understanding that Stephon Diggs goes for 900 yards and 4 touchdowns. Was the trade a success still, or was it a failure? He leaves in free agency. He doesn't come back.
I think it really depends on what the team does. If you told me he went for 900 yards and 4 touchdowns and they go to the AFC Championship game and lose a heartbreaker, then I'm going to say it's a success because, they probably don't get there without him. I think he makes the whole team better. He makes everyone's job on that offense easier. Now, if you tell me they go 10-6 and get bounced in the first round, I'm going to say, no, absolutely not. I think that was a wasted of a pick or whatever. And you probably should have just drafted a guy. There's so many wide receivers you could have just drafted.
Like maybe Keon Coleman.
Keon Coleman. So, yeah.
I have to agree. That's why I didn't ask that. I almost made a poll about that on Twitter, and I was like, the premise of this question is just so that all I'm going to get is comments about how you can't say anything without knowing how the season went. And I agree with you. I think it really depends on how the season goes.
Because we talked about who's number one and this and that at length at different points in time. I really feel like
Nico Collins is wide receiver 1, 100%.
Everybody record that. Everybody got the bookmark it.
Yeah, you got your screen recordings out. Here, go ahead. I'm giving you great material for receipts later on.
I don't know that I'm willing to go there. I like them all as ones. That's been my stance. 3 ones. But
I think that's the easy take to make, though. You get 1A, 1B, 1C, and you go for it. I mean, and you before we went on, you brought up a great point. It could very easily be Tank Dell. I don't want to act like I don't think Tank Dell is a great receiver. I think that Tank Dell did Nico Collins a favor by missing the second half of the season, because without that, we're not talking about Nico Collins as wide receiver 1. I don't think so. I mean,
for me, I respect what Nico did. I think he has the talent. if the ball is fed his way, he'll make stuff happen. Same with Diggs, same with Tank, same with Schultz. I mean, it just depends. Like when you have all this talent together, some guys end up not having huge days. And then you're like, well, what's wrong? Like in Cincinnati, you love to reference Cincinnati. Cincinnati is your test subject. There were days where
100%.
Jamar Chase didn't do anything and no one was questioning his status because Higgins went off or Boyd went off or Mixon went off. And it's like, you know,
If you have enough talent, someone's going to step up and pick up the slack. So
yep.
that's one of the reasons I really like this Stephon Diggs trade, and it's why that question, I asked it to you for the sake of putting it out there, but realistically, as long as and I got that as much when I posted about it on Twitter, just saying that I think Nico Collins is wide receiver one. That realistically, at the end of the day, what matters is that the Texans do well. So, I mean, yeah. And then, I mean, Mr. Williams is bringing up a great point. Tank Dell had 700 yards while missing 7 games. So who knows what we would have seen from him. We could have seen a 1,500-yard receiving season, I'm convinced. But, oh well. Up next, what's your hot take for the 2024-2025 season? What do you got for the Texans in that way?
Hot take. I don't know what's a hot take anymore with these Texans. Like, other than saying that they won't be as good as we all think they'll be. You know what I mean? I'll do this. Hot take. They have 4 primetime games this season. 4. That's a lot.
That's a good amount. I think that's on the money. Some people might say it's too low, but I think even with CJ Stroud, there's still this national, I think the national media is coming around, but it's a slow process. So I'm not going to act like they'll suddenly just be like, the Texans can have all of them. Like they are with, say, the Jets. They set the Jets up so hard when Aaron Rodgers went down because they were like, oh, Aaron Rodgers is in New York. Perfect. And then there's still, I think, I've seen a lot of people that would rank the Jets ahead of the Texans going into the season because Aaron Rodgers is going to be back. And man, they better shore up that offensive line because if they put that fossil behind that offensive line, that fossil is going to crumble. I'll tell you that. So
Jets had a really good offseason, though.
That's a subtle sketch reference. Okay, I don't really refer to Aaron Rodgers as a fossil. I just thought that there was that clip. Get that fossil off the field. But I'm not saying the Jets didn't have a good offseason. I think people went, oh, Aaron Rodgers is back. Okay, we're cool. And what have the Jets done so far to address their offensive line? I know they've made moves, but their draft is going to be really important on how they address the offensive line. But
I think Rick in the chat has a bit of a hot take. I think if you told somebody that all 3 stay healthy and they all have 1,000 yards and 5 TDs apiece, they'd probably take that money. They'd probably take that bet. That's a lot.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. So Rick, I'll tell you, I threw that comment up there at one point, but I'll talk about it. I mean, I told Tom, I said, you got 3 wide receivers, and then you've got your 1 or 2 wide receiver 4 and 5 that'll get maybe 200 to 500 yards apiece, depending. You've got Dalton Schultz who will get 500 or 600 yards, and so when you distribute the yards for Stroud, you either believe he's going to get similar or more yards, so 42 to 5,000 yards in that area, and if he does that, there's plenty of yards to believe that he can get all 3 of his top receivers 1,000 yards apiece. That's very easy work if he's getting that much. Now, if you believe he's taking a step back and there's only 3,800 yards to go around, one of the top 3 is not going to get 1,000 yards. So there's also the fact. Oh, sorry. No, you got it.
I think you're missing one key point, one huge thing, and that's Joe Mixon. And the fact of the matter is that the Texans are still going to want to run the ball 20 times. And I also think he's probably going to get 5 targets a game. So when you factor in what Joe Mixon is and what they're going to be able to do with Joe Mixon, I feel like the best you can hope for is 2 of the 3 getting to 1,000 yards.
I mean, I agree with you, but let's assume 4,500 yards from CJ Stroud this season. Let's assume he only takes 300 yards step forward, which would be ignorant considering that, if Tank Dell's back, he's guaranteed. But anyway, we'll go with 4,500. I don't want to be too aggressive and go with 5,000 like I really should for this, but let's go with 4,500. Let's assign 3,000 yards to Diggs, Tank, and Nico. And then we'll go 500 yards to Schultz. We'll go 400 yards to Noah Brown. And we'll divvy up 300 yards between the rest of the wide receivers. So that puts us at 3,800, right? I'm losing track of my math there. No, that puts us at 4,200. And then there's another 300 yards for Joe Mixon. there. So I've just distributed those yards in a way. But I will give you this. The big thing I think is hindering from all wide receivers from getting to 1,000 is that assumes that all three of the top wide receivers only get 1,000 yards. Exactly. Very precisely. Whereas I think you could see one of them get 1,000 yards or so. You could have a 1,200 yard receiver and a 1,500 yard receiver. And when you start reaching that height, then you lose out on the ability to distribute. You either take it away from other players, or I think the more likely solution is that one of them goes under, not by much. I'd say that maybe 800 to 900 yards for one of them is a very acceptable and reasonable result, personally. But if you want my hot take for this season, and I think that Rick's hot take was really good, because I agree with you, that is kind of a hot take. It would take a major step from CJ Stroud forward. I think we all think he's capable of it, but we just haven't seen it yet. So we've seen the signs are there, but are we going to get, 54, Peyton Manning, 5,400 yards, all-time leader. So are we going to get a Peyton Manning-esque season in his sophomore season? I think the slump is more likely. I'm not going to say slump as a bad thing. I'm just going to say, to me, a slump for CJ Stroud is getting the same or a little less from him next season with the weapons that he has. That would be disappointing to me. But my hot take on the season, I mean, I don't know. I've had so much time to think about it. Hot take. Oh my gosh. That's a good one. I like that. I don't know, man. My hot take is that special teams is going to take a step back. I think that we've had some turnover. I don't know. I just wanted to be. You're asking me to come up with a hot take off the top of my head, and that's the hottest take I've got. I don't believe it. It's just we've had turnover at punter. Kaimi has a big contract now. He's one of the 5 top highest paid kickers in the league. Some would call him a dome merchant. I'm not one of those people, but I've seen that thrown around. The biggest thing is with the change in kickoff return. Over the past 3 seasons, Frank Ross has looked really good because he's made more than most kickoffs are just out the back of the end zone and done in the modern NFL. But I think that with the change in rules and the encouragement of more returns, we might see a step back in that way. I don't actually think that, okay? I'm just trying to... You guys are asking me for a hot take. There it is. That's the hot take, okay? I need to clarify. I've sung the praises of Frank Ross for the entire offseason, the entire season. When Tom can vouch for me on that, but I don't have...
That's why I was so surprised when you went at the... You've been championing this dude. Now all of a sudden you're like...
The next John Harbaugh, I mean... What more can I say? I'll come up with a better hot take next week. Just disregard everything I just said because it was nonsense. Or you can screen record it and then I can act like I was right when it does happen if it does. But I hope it doesn't. But man, I don't know. Let's see. I had a question in here, or no, a comment. JXM7 Automatic says, "Can I leave my team and join y'all? I'm a Spurs fan and was born in San Antonio and made the mistake of being a Titans fan." Of course, that's a mistake. I agree with you. That was a huge mistake. Says, "Will the Texans family have me?" It's early enough, right? Here's my thought process on that. The bandwagon, it's loading up. We ride at dawn. And September of 2024, the wagon takes off. And if you're not on it, then maybe we look at you a little different when you decide to join up. But I've never been one to gatekeep the fandom, so I'm obviously joking there. But I mean, yeah, dude, if you want,
say you followed Autry and Al Shazier out over, those are your guys, and
you're like, I was really into those guys, and now they're Texans. I'm here.
Yeah.
And then you can just stick around if they leave. You'd say, well, now I've decided to be loyal to the team. There it is. We've spun it for you. We've spun the web of you switching from that team in Trashville, Tennessee, to the H. So it's a lot shorter drive from San Antonio to Houston. I'll tell you that. So made that drive before. Yeah. Wow, we're at an hour. I feel like we've reached that point where we can probably save some of this discussion for next week. Yeah, everyone does deserve a second chance, Rick. I'm loving the chat today, guys. You guys are really making this fun. So thank you. Tom, do you have any final thoughts before we hop off?
I'm just going to echo what you said. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Sorry if we didn't get to all of y'all. We'll try to do better with the chat. I mean, the DJ up there is spinning it pretty good, but I know we missed some comments here or there. Y'all guys are great. The draft is coming. Cannot wait. The reveal is going to happen, and like the next day, it's going to be draft in our minds, right? Not physically, but in your mind. So it's just going to be a lot of hype next week. Really excited, and then we're all going to have to wait until like August for the Hall of Fame game. I'm really contemplating going for no other reason than I got to get my Texans fixed like as soon as possible.
100%. I mean, I'm looking it up already. The tickets are not super expensive. It's really the logistics around that trip that we would need to work. I'd probably coordinate that with you, Tom, if we decide the bullpen needs to cover that game. My wife has already semi given me the go ahead on that. She kind of said, "Oh yeah, totally you can," and I was like, "Do you mean that though?" You're gonna be pretty pregnant when that happens. I don't know if you're thinking ahead on that. I don't know if I should leave you at that state. But and for those of you who didn't know, who don't watch super hardcore on the bullpen, my wife's been pregnant for a minute, so with our second, so now I've said it again. It's out there in case you were wondering. But yeah, once again, thanks to the chat. Shout out to Patrick Mahomes for making a stop in. I'm gonna tell people Patrick Mahomes showed up to our podcast. The totally real 100%. Pat made a stop. Maybe next time we can ask him how Taylor's doing, how Travis is handling all that. But this is a Texans podcast, so who knows? We might not even broach the topic. But yeah, until next time, as always, stay classy, Houston, and Vamos Texans.